Hello and welcome to episode 38 of Generations Apart. I'm Jay.
And I'm Robbie.
And on today's episode, we're taking a look at the Made by Google 2023 keynote, where Google launched the Pixel 8 series of devices, and they may have mentioned AI once or twice. So let's get straight into this, as there was a lot to unpack. Robbie, you've watched the whole thing. It was just over an hour. It happened, it will be last week, as I guess at the point at which you're listening to this, but it happened this week as far as we're concerned. And first thing that struck me about this event was, or made me feel old, was the announcement early doors from Google about this being 25 years of Google. And I have to say that made me feel really old, as I remember Googling for the first time a long, long time ago, it seems.
Yeah, it's weird, that one, because it feels like almost it should be around for much longer. But I forget how young the internet is, really. 25 years old. Yeah, 25-year anniversary for Google.
Speaking of other things that are 25 years old, and this is really random and nothing to do with the episode, but I picked one of these up for those who are watching on camera. It's a Gameboy Color, which the camera doesn't want to focus on. I picked one of these up because I've got my daughter into Gen 1 Pokemon, and I wanted one that she could play. And this is the Atomic Purple, for those watching. This is also 25 years old.
That's crazy when you put that. That when you see hardware of that era, it really puts it in perspective.
But that's funny, is that Google is as old as the Game Boy Color.
Yep.
But you would, I think if someone said to me which came first, the Game Boy Color or Google, I'd be like Game Boy Color all day long.
100%.
I don't think I'd even have to think about it. But there you go. They also were holding this one a bit like the recent Meta Connect in front of a live audience, which was nice. Although it didn't feel quite as free and kind of relaxed as the Meta event. It felt a little bit more, maybe somewhere between Samsung and Meta. It was very, very scripted. You know, that you could see they were hitting all the notes.
Definitely a smaller audience as well. You could really hear the whoops, the individual whoops and cheering.
It's probably like 3 or 4 people doing it. And then they started with something that they basically did throughout the show. And I stopped making notes about it at one point, which is they said AI is more helpful for everyone. And what does that mean for Pixel? And AI, the amount of times, I didn't count it, I should have. I'd love to know if anyone out there has gone as, if someone has done a count. I'd love to know how many times the words AI or the letters AI are said during this presentation, because in stark contrast to Apple, which we talked about at their event earlier in September, barely mentioned it. Google never stopped talking about AI, which, I'm not, and there's no right or wrong here, by the way. I'm just making a point that I think it's really interesting to see how each firm approaches this. I will say now, and we said it before we started recording, but for the benefit of those listening, I've never watched a Google or a Made by Google event. I've been an Apple fanboy for a very long time, and I've just not bothered. Similarly, I said that same thing about Samsung. I'd never watched a Samsung event until this year, so I'm broadening my horizons for the podcast and for our listeners.
The conversion begins.
The conversion begins. But I have to say, the more of these I watch, the more I'm going to say devalue some of the things that Apple say, but the more I realise everyone's saying the same thing.
Yeah.
Everyone talks about beautiful lines, contoured this, exquisite design, this, brilliant screens, all the superlatives. And I just kind of thought after a while you get numb to it, don't you? It just kind of washes over you. There were a couple that I wrote down, which we'll touch on later on, which I thought were particularly funny.
Was it perhaps the colour that was hopeful? The hopeful colours of the film.
It was the hopeful blue, yeah. That did tickle me. But overall, I know, again, I'm noticing some real consistency between how these events are run, and also where they choose to lean in terms of their power and who they tend to take aim at. And I think it's quite funny that Samsung didn't once take aim at Google. Google haven't taken aim at Samsung. They both take aim at iPhone
100%.
and Apple on a regular basis.
Yeah.
Which is, as a self-confessed fanboy, I'm not one of those for internet trolling and kind of get griefing people who choose other devices. But there's a sort of slightly, it gets my back up when I hear it. I just think, oh come on, Just concentrate on what you're doing well and leave everybody else alone.
Yeah. Leave Apple alone.
Leave my Apple alone.
It's funny, actually. I wonder, because this format, the kind of keynote for releasing hardware devices, I do think Apple probably started that. I'm trying to think, if there was early keynote. I mean, maybe Microsoft with their keynotes back in the day as well, but for consumer technologies like phones, things like that, I feel like Apple is probably the one who started that. So in terms of the format of these events, I do feel like they're probably highly influenced by Apple.
I agree. And like I'm not knocking the format particularly. I think of all the ones we've watched recently, I enjoyed the Meta one the most because it just felt the most relaxed.
Yeah.
Apple's was probably the most highly produced, but there was no live audience, so that obviously was allowed them to do that. Samsung's and this Google one were a little bit stiff. Meta's was the most relaxed and felt most like a conference and less like a sales pitch.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Without the audience plants as well, the audience participation.
Yeah, oh God, that was also in the Samsung one, wasn't it? And we're talking a lot about episodes and things that people may not have heard, so go back and listen to those if you haven't done already, and go and seek out the conferences as well, if you've got the time. They are quite long though, so maybe do our episodes first. So they mentioned that Pixel is designed to bring hardware and software together. They touched on 2016 being the point at which Pixel launched, and they mentioned that their mission was to move from mobile first to AI first. Now, I'd never heard this, so this was like a new take for me, and I thought it was quite interesting, because if you look at the last 12 months, I think a lot of people would agree, until maybe the last few months, certainly early this year, the feeling was that Google maybe had been caught with their pants down when it came to AI. So to be the ones leading the charge here, making those kind of statements, feels a little strange when you look at how 2023 started.
Yeah, that's I suppose the irony to it. They've always been known as the AI first company, and to be behind with some of the generative AI stuff compared to some of the others out in the market, I think it really was not great for Google in the press, definitely. Especially those early demos of Bard, their version of ChatGPT, I guess, which had several errors and stuff on stage when it was first shown, and that slight marketing gaffe where they displayed an incorrect answer to a question. Yeah. I mean, to be fair, just for balance here, I do think that by the end of this, I was quite impressed with what they were doing with AI. Yeah. So I'm taking some jabs now because those are the notes that I made. Yeah. But by the end, I was quite impressed with some of the stuff that they're putting out there. Yeah. But we'll get to that. I agree. Actually, I was just going to say that the theme of the event, I think, it was almost less about the hardware and more about how it works with AI. It seems very much AI first, which I guess is intended to be Google's USP.
So heavy. Yeah. I mean, they really, really pushed that point. If you went away and you didn't have the letters AI ingrained in your mind, then something was wrong, because I think that was their mission, was to make sure that you knew Google was the place for AI and your phone. So they said Pixel was growing year on year in terms of sales, which, again, great. I don't doubt that. Mm-hmm. I wonder whose lunch they're eating, whether it's Apple's lunch or, Samsung or other mobile providers, or maybe a little bit of everyone's. Yeah. They talked about custom designed data centers running their latest AI models, which I thought was at first was a little bit odd, but then that becomes very clear as to why later in the presentation, and we can touch on that as well. Yeah.
They mentioned it was their chips as well, I think, in running the service, which I didn't realize that they used their
Tensor
own
chips.
Yeah, their own Tensor chips running the servers. So that's actually quite impressive.
Yeah. And then they said, and I wrote the words here, really hammering the AI point. So before we've even started, I'd already made that note, which tells you how many times it was mentioned. And I just put it was interesting to see the company's approach. They talked about computational photography, which is a term that's come up a few times now in different presentations. I think I first heard it at Apple's presentation. Now, it may have been mentioned in other Pixel or sort of Samsung presentations before, but it was a bit new to me, and now it seems to be an acceptable term when we're talking about what is effectively using technology to artificially improve your photography skills, which, absolutely fine. And everyone wants to take good pictures.
Given this is the first of the Google conferences you've seen, you might not know that I think Google are the first company to really popularize that term.
Interesting.
The background of their phones was that for a long time they had, for several generations of the Pixel, they had the same camera sensor on the phone, but year on year the pictures got better, and it was because they developed such an amazing computational photography algorithm that photos just looked incredible on there. So I think it was really quite popularized by Google, that whole idea. And it's not just, after, post photo, fixing the photo, like, some of the magic eraser tools or whatever we'll get into later. It's also just as it takes the photo, it can correct things instantly before it even gets saved to your photos library. It's that kind of thing.
It seems very impressive, and yeah, you're right. We'll talk about that more as we get into it, because we don't actually start with the phones. But I thought it was very interesting. They also then mentioned helpful, simple, personal smartphone experiences as kind of the catchphrase, which I thought, again, was quite an interesting approach, and I think that comes across in the stuff that they were describing. So I thought that was really interesting. And then they mentioned that Google AI was being used to improve all devices, including a number of new rollouts. And this is where they dropped what I didn't realize was their first update, which was the Google Buds Pro, or talking about the rollout of the Google Buds Pro and the AI software that's going to be improving them. So they talked about improved noise cancellation and isolation to improve calls. They also talked about Bluetooth using super wideband to improve speech and audio clarity. They talked about the improved convenience thanks to AI. They said the Buds Pro will pause audio when you start talking, turns on transparency mode, etc. Which I thought was quite interesting. And I must admit, I thought at this point, in terms of the format, we were just getting some general updates.
Yeah,
and we'd be coming back to the Buds later on, because they specifically start very shortly a section around wearables, and I thought that'll be the Buds. They'll be in there. And then they never talked about the Buds again. That was the last thing we heard.
Well, I suppose,
so they've improved them with software, but I suppose that means there's any new versions.
Very small update. So that the Buds themselves, they're already released. Nothing's changed. But this just seems like a bit of a feature update. And actually, the voice isolation, they gave a little demo of what it could do on the stage. You never know how curated these demos are, but it actually sounded really impressive, the isolation of the voice.
I'm like you, though. I take those demos with a pinch of salt, because, of course, you're going to pick the best example. And part of my brain also says, how much did you tamper with that beyond what came out of the device? Again, I'd like to think they wouldn't do that, but you just never know. There was a big round of applause on a couple of occasions where they showed that demo or those sort of features, and I thought, you haven't seen it in action. Like, I don't. If it had been a live on stage demo, I might have felt differently.
You don't know who's in the audience, do you?
True. If it's as good as it was advertised, then great. And actually, again, I'm pretty sure all those features are coming to the AirPods Pro as well. So
already
it's not entirely.
Yeah.
Or I think they were announced as part of the conference early this year. But yeah, great to have. And if you've got some Buds, then brilliant. I just, again, not knowing the format here, assumed, as they were in all the pictures of the early, I guess, promotional material and the stuff they showed on screen as this whole keynote started, I just expected to be seeing updates for all of these devices. And similarly, I think it's the Pixel Fold got a very brief mention in a moment, but never got talked about again. So again, I was expecting another phone, and that didn't come. So on that point, they mentioned there was going to be a feature drop to bring dual screen interpreter mode to the Pixel Fold, which effectively would work as a personal translator across 45 different languages. So the ability to kind of live translate text back and forth. Which was shown off, which very cool.
It was flashed up very briefly as an image, but the way it looks like it works is you have the Fold unfolded. One side of the screen where it's unfolded would have one side of the translation, and then the screen that's folded and facing the other way would be for the person you're communicating with to have the translation on there. So quite a cool feature, quite a good usage of the folding phone, I think. But very brief mention.
But I think that was the only time the Fold got mentioned after that.
Yeah, I did spy a couple of people in the audience with them, though, taking notes and photos. Very
good. And then the last thing before they got into the actual new devices was the mention of AI coming to Google Home. This seemed quite interesting. So they're using generative AI to synthesize your notifications into a streamlined summary view, where you'll be able to ask about notifications using natural language. And the example they showed was a series of your Nest doorbell video notifications, and being able to ask questions of the Gen AI to look at your different notifications and answer things like, did my package arrive? So it would then look at all the different notifications and try and work out whether any of them showed a package being delivered. And they said that was coming next year.
incredible that it's actually going to be able to not just tell if somebody's turned up your door, but it did say that it would be able to identify if a package was also in their hands or brought to the door as well. So very clever. I like that.
I think you get that anyway. I've got a Google Nest camera. You do get that anyway in the device. So it does do that. A package has been delivered. So but it doesn't. Obviously, you can't use Gen AI to analyze the notifications and then work that out. So I guess it would look for one of those notifications having already identified the package and then say, yes, you had a package today. This was the notification. Here's that moment in time. And then it shows you the clip. But yeah, pretty cool.
Didn't realise that. Ring does not do that.
No. I must admit, I've got a bit of a mixed bag when it comes to my smart home. I am predominantly a Echo device for Smart Assistant, which annoyingly doesn't play nice with all the Nest stuff I have around the house. So at some point I will probably have to upgrade to Google, but there's a number of rooms that would need to be swapped out, and I'm not ready for that yet. This was the first of, and I'm just going to mention this because this wasn't, and Google are far from being alone on this. I will say Apple did the same at their iPhone launch. They mentioned features and functionality which are coming, and then mentioned that they wouldn't be here now. There'd be a feature drop either in the future. Now, I think that's fair if it's a couple of months down the line. I'm less bothered if it's a few weeks. Within a month or two of the event. This was just coming next year.
Yeah.
Which, it feels a little bit like, if I'm being cynical, we had nothing else to say. So we're telling you about something that's coming next year because there's not a lot to say about what's dropping now. And there's loads of other stuff that follows, but it just feels like there's quite a lot of the features here that got mentioned in a similar breath that they said, this will be here next year. This will be a feature drop early next year. I just think that's a little bit naughty.
Yeah, all of the conferences seem to have done a bit of this.
They did.
Which is really annoying, yeah. Especially when they don't have like even a month or a quarter in mind of when that'll be released.
Yeah.
The only thing I suppose you can try to assume is that it'll be released before the next event of this kind. Otherwise, they wouldn't have mentioned it. So before October next year is what you would hope for any of these features, I guess.
And I think it'll be earlier than that. I think it'll be early next year. I think it'll probably come within 6 months. But even so, I just think it's a little bit naughty. Because they big it up and then they go, oh, this is coming next year. On to the next thing. And they'll rattle on. I mean, at least they called it out, though. I will say that, and as an Apple fanboy, I will hold myself up here. There have been some times when Apple have announced a solution or a new app and then not told you that it isn't instantly available with the next version of iOS and that it comes months after. Freeform is an example of that, which was announced and bigged up as part of iOS 16.
Yeah.
And then didn't drop with the software. It came months later.
Yeah. I think things like Stage Manager in iOS 15 was another one where they announced it and then it didn't quite make it into launch. It was in the betas and it was taken out of the betas and then it wasn't there on Go Live. So yeah, we're going through that now as well with the journaling app that was supposed to come with iOS 17. That's been delayed as well. Yeah.
So it's, like I say, not taking aim at Google here. I'll call out anybody else who does it. But it's a little frustrating. So then we got into the hardware.
Yeah.
And the first category was wearables, and it was pitched as a category, and there was only one thing in it, which I thought was a bit weird, which was the Pixel Watch. Pixel Watch version 2. My first comment here was those bands look familiar. So their wristwatches, the stranded bands looked very similar to those you might find on an Apple Watch. Again, not a massive surprise. There you go. Look, you can see it in the background of the picture that Robbie's showing if you're over on YouTube. If not, go and have a look at the links below where we'll have all the links. You can go and find these things for yourself. But
they do look like a sports band, actually, now that you mention it.
It looks very similar to the sports band in terms of how it works, but there we go.
Look at that hopeful colour, though. They don't have that at Apple.
Hopeful blue. So a couple of notes I made here, and I'd forgotten, actually, that Google had purchased Fitbit. So they mentioned Fitbit is at the fitness core. They said more durable cover glass, new watch straps, lots of good stuff there. They didn't really labour on the hardware for too long. There was some talk later on about sensors, but we'll come to that. Mm-hmm. They then moved on to talk about the upgrades across the board to the whole experience. They mentioned a quad-core CPU, 24-hour battery life on a single use, so not radically different to an Apple Watch, which is, again, my only real point of comparison, so apologies to those listening who are getting fed up with me bashing on about that. They said Wear OS 4 experience with lots of improvements to standard apps. So they said all apps are kind of getting a bump.
Yep.
As part of this, they said there were some new safety features around medical info and emergency sharing in the watch. One of the features I did like, and again, I think something similar is in some of the Apple tech, but I liked it how it was packaged here, was safety check.
Yeah. Is that the check-ins feature?
Yeah, so they said it's coming over from the phone. They said let you set a timer to check in, and if you fail to check in, it shares your location with friends and loved ones.
Yeah.
And the first thing I thought about is really sad. You know, like stealth-based video games where you knock a guard out and then he doesn't do his normal check-in, and then you've got panic stations when all his mates turn up. That was the first thing I thought.
It's such a gamer mentality.
Yeah, I know, I can't help it. But I thought that was a really good, in all seriousness, a really good feature for people, especially, people going home late at night.
Yeah, exactly.
Getting in taxis, things like that, being able to just make sure that you've got a kind of a check-in that you have to perform, which someone else might not know about, that then notifies those who need to know about where you are. So that's a really great feature. They said Fitbit and Google were teaming to bring new AI algorithms, new software and new sensors together to improve that watch. And they mentioned that the heart rate sensor had what looked like a significant bump. So it's gone from a single node to multiple nodes.
Yeah.
Which allows it to capture much more accurate, I guess, your heart rate and stuff like that.
They said 40% more accurate, which is quite considerable.
That is a big jump. Yeah, that is a big jump. And they mentioned as a result of all of the AI that they're packing into this thing, that there'll be new coaching features and new glanceable AI. Wasn't quite sure what they were aiming at there. But the new sensors will also help you monitor your sleep better and detect stress.
Yep.
And offer ways to deal with it, which is quite interesting. Mm-hmm. And they did show that on screen. They showed like a little video of someone kind of checking in, and I think it's based on you describing at certain points, based on certain metrics, how you're feeling, and then it's basically querying, are you stressed? And if you say yes, then it goes, oh, okay, I'll remember these patterns next time, might mean you're stressed.
That's right, yeah. So kind of learning the individual user, because I think I saw on the advert, something popped up saying, are you stressed? And then track your mood, and you selected how you were feeling at the time, and then you track a few different metrics, so then it helps it predict when you're stressed, I guess, a bit more in the future, and then things that you can use to tackle it.
Yeah, I really like that. They also mentioned that the Fitbit app had been newly designed, which is valuable for everyone, but they mentioned that, and they mentioned coaching and mindfulness sessions would now be in the app, but they said that personal AI would give you better insights into your Fitbit data and personal coaching. And the example they gave, which I thought was really cool, was that they said, today's run felt more difficult than my previous runs. Why was that? And then using the Gen AI, it would take your statement, it would analyze your fitness data, and then it would provide you with potential reasons why that might be. So it would tell you, perhaps that your run route this time around had an increased elevation. Perhaps there was something in the weather. Perhaps there was something in your performance. Perhaps your heart rate was a little bit off. And then it would also give you like new coaching and personalized coaching to support you in like sort of dynamic data to help you improve your fitness overall, which I thought was really good.
I actually really like that. I don't know if you've had that experience before where you've, say, been on a run and for no reason it feels like that was way harder than it usually would be. So to have something
definitely,
where you could just have like the AI look across all the metrics, say like the weather and the elevation, or maybe your sleep from the last night, because I think that mentioned it in the demo as well, that you hadn't been sleeping well for the last few nights, which could have made it harder. Really helps give you that insight into what's going on with your own body, which I actually really like that. I wish Apple would bring something like that, and I think that would be really useful.
Yeah, I mean, and then they're capturing all the data, aren't they? So let's be honest, there's probably not a lot here in data points that aren't being captured by most of these smartwatches now, and these wearables. But how they're implementing the on-device AI and some off-device AI, which we'll talk about later, is really interesting. Yeah. And I've got to imagine that we'll see that come to other devices in the future, but it's good if you're a Google owner that you get it first by the looks of it.
Yeah.
They mentioned that these capabilities were coming next year, so they're not here now, and they will come to those on the Fitbit Labs Priority Access Program.
Yeah.
And Pixel phone owners will get priority access again over them. So you're not getting any of that this year, so don't stress it if you've got those devices this year. You're not going to see those improvements. But next year,
Yeah.
If you're in one of those elite groups, then you're going to get access to that and get to start playing with it.
It's interesting actually because the Google have always been like that with their Pixel devices. Obviously, they create Android as well, so a lot of the Android features and a lot of the, I guess, Google-specific features that may end up on other Android devices at some point are always on the Pixel first, which kind of, I suppose, their other USP is that it's the rawest form, the best form of Android because it's at source, and you get all the additional experimental features that are not going to be out on other devices. And it's the same with the watches, especially now they own Fitbit. You might own a Fitbit device and say have a Samsung instead, but you won't get access to these features unless you've got a Pixel phone, which, interesting.
Yeah. I mean, pre Apple Watch and, in the wearable space, I used to have Fitbit devices and they were really good. I used to use Fitbit for all of my kind of weight tracking, running and everything. I used to have some scales that were smart scales, and they would, every time you got on them, it would sync your weight to your account, and then you'd have it, all little things like that. But obviously I've moved away from that really as I've kind of got more into Apple's ecosystem. So it's interesting to kind of dip back in here and see how they've progressed and what they've been doing. That was kind of it for the watch. They then did throw in very quickly at the end, the Fitbit Charge 6 had just released with the new features bringing music and maps into the device for the first time, which I think is a slimmer, less feature-packed device. More of a, I guess, a sort of step tracker kind of thing, really. Yeah.
I suppose the only other thing to mention about was the price. So it came through as $349 USD, but also £349, as I just saw on the website as well. And that actually comes with 6 months of Fitbit Premium as well, which Christina's tried that before. It's actually really good. It comes with tons of different things, lots of mindfulness stuff as well, like meditation sessions and lots of additional features that are quite good in the app.
And what I thought was interesting, and I don't know if you picked this up, they didn't mention it, I don't think, in the audio, but it was on the slides at the end when they were doing the phones. Pretty sure, at least the Pro, if not the Series 8 standard, came with a free watch.
Really?
I'd have to pan back and have a look at the video, but I'm pretty sure it said, I did write it down, we'll come to it later on, maybe we can check the video or something, but I'm sure right at the end when they were announcing the prices on screen, there was mention of a free watch.
I wonder if it's maybe heavily discounted.
I don't know. It said free. It said free. But anyway, we'll check it while we're going. Perhaps if you can have it in the background and scrub through it or something. I don't know if you can have a look. It was right towards the end when they were mentioning the price. I specifically think I noticed it on the Pro screen, but it might have been on the previous one. And I guess that is the point at which the wearable section ended.
Yeah. So the one wearable.
It's the one wearable. And then we moved on to Pixel smartphones, and we basically spent the rest of the session on the Pixel 8 and the 8 Pro. So they started off, and I didn't write all the stuff down because it was a little bit cheesy. Like I said, it was all the superlatives. Lots of talk about the design, the feel, and the colours. Natural and inviting hues. I wrote that down. That was one of the things they said. Blue is energetic and hopeful, to which I just put, what? Exclamation mark.
Hopeful. What a way to describe the colour.
I was like, very strange. They mentioned, I think one of them had like a ceramic feel, and it was all a little bit much, to be honest. But fine. They like the way their phones look. They talked about sustainability in the mind with their design. They didn't go anywhere near as deep as Apple did, which was interesting. And my cynical Apple fanboy brain went, "It's because you're not doing as much." But maybe that's me being cynical.
Maybe
but
they just didn't have the budget for a movie.
For a movie. Yeah, but I do think they could have said a little bit more. So they mentioned they were working towards their commitment of net zero by 2030. So very much the same kind of mission as Apple. They were working on repairability. So they did mention partnering with iFixit to make it easier for DIYers to repair devices. So that was again something that I think Apple also mentioned, trying to improve repairability, which
really
is cool.
Underrated feature, I think, because Apple gets a lot of criticism for their devices not being super easy to fix. And to partner with iFixit is basically the gold standard in the market now for making your phone repairable. I think the Steam Deck did that when they launched. I mean, there was a joke before the Steam Deck even launched that you could build a Steam Deck from the components that they have listed on iFixit. They've just got everything on there to be able to repair it and all the guides to go with it. So that is actually a huge deal. Very underrated kind of statement as part of that presentation, I think.
They mentioned a lot about being recyclable or having recyclable parts, but it didn't really go much further than that, which is why, again, cynically, I thought maybe you're just not doing as much. But fully recyclable, all paper packaging as well, all cardboard. Then they started getting into the devices themselves. And I must be honest, because these were new to me, I didn't click initially that a lot of the talk was about the Pixel 8, not the Pro, or that there was even a Pro.
Yeah.
So they started off with the Pixel. They said they had a new Actua display.
Yep.
They didn't really tell us more about that. They said it was 6.2 inches, 40% brighter than the Pixel 7. And the Pixel Pro has a Super Actua display, which is 6.7 inches and goes to 2,400 nits, and it's brightest with variable refresh rates up to 120 hertz.
Interestingly, I think that's actually... So the Pixel 8 is technically smaller than last year's Pixel 7. So interesting that they're just going that direction for the normal version instead of the Pro version. I'm pretty sure that it's a little bit smaller. I think it's maybe by 0.1 of an inch, so it's not huge amounts, but there's lots of people who complain about the size of phones these days, especially if you really like a small phone.
Well, I think I was going to say Apple's iPhone 15 range are smaller, aren't they, on all fronts than the previous generation devices without compromising the screen real estate. So maybe there's something similar here. Maybe they've managed to just reduce the bezels and therefore take the phone down slightly.
And there's lots of people who are upset about the axing of the iPhone mini, but we're still not quite there yet, I think, with the small phones.
So that was all they really said. Did you pick anything else up about the displays specifically? Because I feel like they made a fuss about Actua displays and then Super Actua, but never really explained anything more. There's probably loads more on the web about the technical, but did you pick up anything else specifically? I
think the brightness is the main thing. So the Actua display, which is on the Pixel 8, is 2,000 nits, which is very bright, very, very bright. But the Actua Pro, the actual, what was it called?
Super Actua is 2,400 nits.
2,400 nits, which is huge. It's really bright. So you can imagine outdoors that's going to perform really, really well.
Yeah. Because they went on about the sort of environments you'll use the phone in, but again, I was waiting for them. The way they pitched the Actua display and then the Super Actua, I was waiting for a bit more of an explanation as if it was something very new. But anyway, like I said, maybe that's just me being a newcomer.
Just looking at the side by side as well, I think the only other difference I can spot in the displays is the Pro, the Super Actua display.
Oh, actually, your Pixel 8 is bigger than look. You said smaller. It's gone the other way, isn't it?
That's the 7A.
What's the 7A?
Let me... Yeah.
Oh, you're right. No, it's gone down. What is the 7A then? Oh my god.
7A is like the more budget friendly, I believe, version of the 7.
Was that like the XR that the iPhone had at one point?
Kind of. Right. So 6.3 to 6.2 this year for the Pixel 8. But the other thing that I've noticed is it gets a bump in refresh rate to up to 120 hertz, but it's variable refresh rate between 60 and 120 hertz on the Pixel 8. But on the Pixel 8 Pro, it's 1 hertz to 120 hertz, which is really good because it means if there's still images on your phone, it'll only refresh once per second, which is incredible for battery life, basically. It's the best part of that. So all the kind of always on display technologies that you get on lots of the phones these days and watches relies on needing a really low refresh rate. So it doesn't need to refresh the screen so often, so it can save battery as it's got the screen on all the time. So it's the same with iPhones for like the nightstand mode, and same for always on displays for like watches and things like
that. My notes then pivot to the temperature sensor on the Pixel Pro, because they touched on like the flash and all that kind of jazz. But I thought this was really interesting actually, and took me by surprise. So they said that on the Pro specifically, there was a temperature sensor which you could point at something like a pan of milk or or a baby's bottle. They're awaiting sign-off as well for sort of medical sign-off for this to be used for personal temperature taking for Fitbit data, which I thought was really interesting. So, if it's as accurate as they're making it out to be, you can just point that thing like a temperature laser. Yeah. A lot of people actually do use things like that in the kitchen or in other places, and your phone will just tell you how hot something is. Yeah, and that's really cool. I'm not sure that I'd have a massive amount of use for it in my day-to-day life, but maybe I would. I thought it was really interesting, and to me, that was one of those kind of what a weird thing to add to a phone. But that's really cool. I really liked it. Yeah,
that was my thought. Yeah, that is a weird thing to add to a phone. But I like the use case that they mentioned of the, the baby's bottle. I think that's a really good idea. But also just anything that you're cooking, I think could be quite interesting to. You might all of a sudden get really picky about the temperature of the water that you're drinking. You know, some people like room temperature water.
Well, maybe we're foreshadowing episode 39 here, Robbie, but you could point it at an iPhone 15 and work out if it was overheating.
Ooh, I like that.
Anyway, let's move swiftly on. Then we started to get inside the phone, and we talked about the next gen Google Tensor G3 mobile chip with all of its subsets effectively upgraded. I didn't even try and make all the notes at this point, to be honest. There was too many technical things talked about, but they basically said it's an upgrade on all fronts to all elements of the chip, and it pushes the boundaries of AI innovation. So twice as many machine learning processes than the Pixel 6. I don't know why they chose.
Yeah,
I mean, I guess double just sounds cooler than 0.5, 50% better. So 2 gens ago, it can deal with, so the heaviest models on the Pixel 8 are doing 10 times the amount of processing that the Pixel 6 models would have done on the heaviest ML models. Mm-hmm. So that's a big deal as well. This results in big improvements on speech and NLP. It can convert languages back and forth between multiple languages, like on the fly. They said it can read web pages out loud. I must admit, I put clever, but the voice they played was still pretty awful. The lady who introduced it said it was more human, but if I'm honest, I think more than a couple of minutes of that voice reading something back would grate heavily on me. The article in the example was 6 minutes long, and I thought, God, don't let that play out.
It's funny, actually, because a lot of their other demos of the AI voices are really quite convincing. Like with the call screening we'll get to later, but
yeah, that was really impressive. But I mean, this really wasn't. And
no,
I don't know. I get it, and I'm sure there's loads of accessibility reasons why having a page read out to you would be really useful.
Yeah.
But the argument they made was, like I can do this while I'm, on my commute, and I can just listen to an article. And I was like, yeah, you could, but 6 minutes of that, it was great.
I have to say, I prefer listening to articles. I do that, actually. I've got an app that does that. It is better, though. The voice, I'd say, was better than what they demoed.
I tried an app recently that had a similar offering, and I got about halfway through someone's lengthy blog and decided it just felt too unnatural. It doesn't help either that I think it's got quite a sort of heavy Americanized accent.
Yeah.
So it's like American robot, and I was like, no, can't do it. But, still really cool that it can do that on device. Call screening, though, like you just mentioned, I thought this was really cool.
Yeah.
So they said that call screening was going to aim to reduce 50% of junk calls. And what it basically does, if I've got this right, is it answers the call for you. Mm-hmm. It uses that artificial voice, almost like an assistant, to announce itself as artificial, which I thought was good. It didn't try and pretend. Explained that it was there to screen the call and asked the caller to explain what the call was about.
Yeah.
The software would then determine whether the user would be put through or not. If it thinks it was worth it, it would provide a description of the call that the caller gave in order that you could then choose to answer the phone based on the description and the call coming through. And if it wasn't something that it wanted to answer, I think the example they gave was kind of one of these fake lottery win spam adverts, then it just politely tells them to go away. And I thought that was super cool. Yeah. I want that. I want that now, because I get so much crap through, like I'm sure everybody else does, of spam calls. I would love something like that to just answer all my calls for me.
Me too.
And this was, to be honest, the turning point in the presentation for me, where I thought, okay, I like this idea they've got here, or the angle they're pushing with the AI, which is that it becomes your assistant.
Yeah.
And wouldn't we all like a personal assistant? And I'm like, actually, there are some things that I would really like a personal assistant for. Those kind of pain points on a daily basis would be great.
Yeah.
Field my calls, both work and personal, and tell me what I need to deal with and what I don't. Get rid of those that I don't. Or give me the choice to quickly decide if I want to take it or not. So I was really impressed with that.
They're really convincing as well. The audio that they played from the assistant actually asking questions on the call, they just sound like a normal person, like a normal PA asking the questions. And they've done similar demos in the past. I can't remember if this particular feature is new or it's just been kind of enhanced as part of this offering. But they have demoed some similar things before. I think I saw a demo a long time ago where it was like asking Google Assistant to book you a haircut, a hair appointment or something. And it would go and would point at the place you want to call, and it would look at your calendar, it would find the right spot, and it wouldn't even tell the person it's speaking to that it's an AI. It's that convincing. It didn't need to. And yeah, it's actually, it manages to book something and speak to someone on the phone and say that they want something for that particular slot. They find it, a spot on the calendar, and it works. So yeah, it's just another added feature of that, and I just think it's really cool. I'm the same. I get tons of spam calls, and so just to weed those out would be fantastic, wouldn't it?
It really would. I thought that was such a useful feature. I don't know that I necessarily want it making appointments for me. Maybe that would be useful. I could see that being useful as long as it does it well, because I wouldn't want to annoy places that I'm giving my custom to by spamming them with bots. What if you end up with bots trying to place calls, the bots trying to answer the calls? It's just bots going at it, trying to get into each other's sort of diaries and phone books. But for me, I think what's really useful there is just being given the opportunity to, well, one, it sifts out the noise when you don't want it. And two, it gives you an opportunity there to take those calls and deal with them when you need to.
Yeah.
I miss a lot of calls from numbers I don't recognize because I've just got to the point now where I just don't answer my phone. If I don't know the person who's calling me, I'm really reluctant to answer.
Yeah.
Sorry for anyone who's watching this that's ever tried to call me. That's why I don't answer, because I'm always busy on calls with work anyway. In the evenings I don't want to be bothered. But if I knew it was from someone that I genuinely need to interact with, for example, then, like the doctors or, something to do with the kids or whatever, I would take it.
Yeah.
And likewise, I assume it has no impact on your contact list. If someone's in your contact list, they're coming straight through regardless.
Yeah.
So it's not going to block everything.
Yeah.
And make all of you, make people deal with this virtual assistant when they don't have to. It is just trying to weed out corporations that are trying to spam you, basically.
Yeah.
And so really, really like that.
There was another version of it as well that they talked about where you could have it screen a call, and it would give you options. If you have got your phone in your hand as it's screening a call, it gives you options of responses that you can have. So it gives you a transcript of what's discussed on the call whilst it's been screening between the AI and the person who's calling. And say it doesn't actually need your attention at all, you can give kind of one-tap responses so that the AI responds on your behalf. So say, I think the example they gave was a GP, the doctor's confirming your appointment for tomorrow, and you can just say, yep, confirmed, and then the AI would confirm it for you, and you wouldn't even need to answer the phone, it just does it for you. So stuff like that, it's like so cool.
And do you know what it's try to get that sentence again. Do you know what it's doing? It's solving a genuine problem. Like, a lot of this stuff is kind of, great, okay, it's more powerful, it's doing cool stuff. And even some of the Gen AI stuff we'll talk about in a minute it's a nice to have. Is it essential? Probably not. That's a genuine problem that people have. It will make people more efficient. It will remove some of that frustration. That is genuinely going to improve the quality of people's lives. Only a small amount, don't get me wrong, unless you're overwhelmed with these calls. But I bet there are loads of people who get these calls and would be grateful to have something like this just take that pain away.
Yeah. It's quite a convincing USP, I think, as well for Google, because you can only get it on their devices using their software. And that's the theme, I think, with some of the other AI stuff that we'll talk about later, like the photography stuff. You can only do that on these devices. And
you need the Tensor G3.
You need the Tensor G3.
I mean, it'd be interesting again. I'm going to bring this back to my beloved Apple, but you're going to see this come to other devices at some point. They'll find ways to innovate and do the same thing. I mean, Apple's got something similar whereby it will allow someone to start leaving you a voicemail, and it will transcribe that, and in live real time you can then choose to answer it. But it's nowhere near as clever as this.
True.
And I think this is much, much more impressive.
I think to kind of just respond to that point, though, by the time other phone manufacturers bring that to their phone, this will be even more mature. There'll be other AI features they've got, and that's the benefit of being an AI first company for so long, is that these features are becoming much more mature, and additional features are coming out.
I mean, back when I used to work, like pre sort of IT career, I used to work for financial advisors, and they used to employ a company. I cannot remember what they were called now. Is it like Moneypenny or something? And basically, it was you would get a person sat at home or in a call center somewhere who would effectively behave as your first point of contact for your organization. So they took away some of the admin burden on an organization by doing a lot of this, basically screening calls, getting things through to the right people, blocking those that didn't need to be sort of put through, taking messages and giving you the information in email so you could call people back if you needed to. I mean, imagine if you ran one of those firms right now, you're probably thinking, ooh, this could be a problem, or maybe we need to invest in some technology like this to enhance what we do. If those companies even exist. I mean, this is like 25 years ago, so maybe it doesn't. Cool. So from there, we went on to the camera. Fully upgraded hardware, breakthrough features, they said. Powerful AI and Tensor G3 coming together basically to do lots of different things. I'll rattle through some of these and then you stop me where you want to get into something.
Sure.
Because there's quite a few that were just, nice to talk about, and then there was things that were really clever. So first couple of things, improved low light photography and improved video capabilities.
Yep.
So they showed lots of really cool functionality where the AI was improving the overall look and feel of your images. Real tone, accurately portraying skin tones with better autofocus as well. And they showed a kind of fun little video of different people with different ethnic backgrounds kind of jumping in front of the camera and having a bit of fun with it. And that was quite cool. Then there was one that I did think was clever, which was computational audio. So we've had computational photography. Now we've got computational audio. This is Audio Magic Eraser, basically. So using the Tensor G3 and advanced ML models, it will sort and group sounds in a video and then allow you to control them independently. So the example they showed was someone filming their baby kind of making their first noises, and in the background there's a dog barking. And then they showed this audio tech effectively splitting those two audio tracks and letting you just mute the dog effectively.
Yeah.
Meaning that the baby's voice came through much more clearly. That looked really, really clever.
Yeah.
I'd love to try that in a few different environments and see exactly how good it is.
Yeah.
But that was a really cool feature, and I like that.
The demo was crazy as well. It worked so well. They're kind of going in the same theme as... So Magic Eraser on the phone has already been a feature for a while. So to be able to do it on audio for videos, I think is really quite clever. And it's in keeping with, it looks like, their plans for... I mean, we can get into the debate about the content itself and how genuine it becomes after tampering it with this much, but it's
I don't think that messing with audio is too bad. Like if you're just taking out background noise, and at the end of the day, if you just want to hear your baby more clearly, whatever.
Of course.
I think that's very clever, and I can imagine that being really useful in a number of different environments. I mean, you think about anyone who's trying to make content and they're filming in an environment with some sort of background noise. Or annoying, uncontrollable background noise. We've had the ability to remove, like humming and kind of aircon buzz and stuff like that for a while. Yeah. To a degree, so it's not great. But actually being able to remove specific sounds without you having to mess around yourself and isolate them and have some sort of background in audio engineering, that's really cool.
Yeah.
Someone like me. Without peeling back the curtain a bit too much here, I do the visuals for this podcast. Robbie does the audio, and I wouldn't know where to start with some of the stuff that you do when it comes to mixing the audio. This takes away some of that need, I guess, to have those kind of skills. You can just kind of go in and on a basic level say, take that noise out, which is great. So it's just empowering ordinary people to enhance their own content. Group photos. Then I thought this was really cool. Loved this.
Creepy.
This is the best. You thought it was creepy? I thought it was really
creepy.
good. So I'm interested to find out why in a second. Let's just explain it. So this was the best take feature. So it basically uses a series of photos. So it captures a number of photos in quick succession as you're taking your picture. And then it helps you to choose the best expression of each person one by one. So it's not like using any kind of creepy AI to recreate their face. It is literally giving you a number of stills as they posed to be able to pick the one that was the best. So if you ended up with a family member who keeps closing their eyes or blinking or pulls a funny face as everybody else looked really good, you could very easily go through and person by person, as it recognised people in the photo, choose the best versions of the smile, the silly face, or whatever they pulled. So, Robbie, why did this one creep you out?
Well, I've watched a bunch of commentary on this, and this I think is delving into the weirdness of. I've seen Marcus Brownlee talk about it a lot, and others as well, about what is a photo. This kind of manipulation of the photo, that didn't happen. That is not a snapshot of something that happened. That is a makeup of lots of different photos at very different times. So while I like the kind of audio editing that we mentioned before, the audio eraser, because that is, that was captured as it was, you just kind of filtering out some stuff. This is the photo that you'll see at the end of applying this never happened. Like, it was never a perfect photo, and to apply it like that just feels a bit weird.
I can see where you're coming from, and if the faces were being taken from multiple different images throughout a day, or something creepy like that, where I simply didn't smile at that moment in time, I was miserable in that picture. How dare you make me look happy? I get that. Which is what I think this is doing, is it's just taking a handful of snaps in the moment, a bit like holding down and rolling the shutter and taking multiple pictures. People have been doing that in Photoshop for ages. Photographers do that in professional shoots all the time. It's why they roll the trigger, they roll the shutter and just take multiple shots. It's because they need to be able to get the best one. It's not that dissimilar to moving from film to digital and having the ability to take loads of pictures and then get the best one and delete the ones that didn't work. You're not faking someone's happiness. If there isn't a smile in that series of pictures, there's no smile. It's just trying to catch. And if you've this speaking as a dad, if you've ever tried to catch a couple of kids in a picture or more kids and get them all to provide the face that you want, the smile to camera at the same time, it is nigh on impossible. So if you could choose a smile from each of them across 4 or 5 pictures in that moment, I think that's okay. But I can see where you're coming from. I understand the argument.
I think
hugely if it's in the moment, feature. I'm not as worried.
A hugely useful feature, definitely, to get that kind of perfect photo. So I can definitely, and I've had group photos where it's been a nightmare getting the best one, where everyone's looking kind of normal, I guess. I just think it's a bit odd, and the direction that Google are going with their photos, I don't know. It feels like year on year they're adding more features to make them even more unrealistic. And this
Shall we talk about Magic Editor? Because I think this is where we then start to get into the realms of, so Magic Editor was the next thing they talked about. And that's using Gen AI to reimagine your photo. So this is basically bringing Photoshop-like capabilities, very powerful, to your device. So from memory, they were showing here the removal of large objects like cars, and they said it's got more powerful than previously. But I think it, lets you move someone in the frame. You're showing now sort of a GIF of it kind of doing some of the things that it can do. I think this is arguably worse if you want to talk about authenticity.
Oh, I agree.
Than the previous one. But let's be honest, we're at that point now where most images we see online from anyone who is remotely influential, they're all curated. Most of them have been messed with. I do think fundamentally removing things from the background or changing the environment is a little bit phony. Definitely. And depending on what you're using them for, I don't know how I feel about it. If you're using it, if it's just for you, then I don't know, maybe in 20 years' time when you look back at that picture and you remember it differently, that's okay if you want to remember it differently. If you're trying to pretend you were somewhere that you're not, or that you were in an environment that you weren't, I'm not so sure how I feel about that.
It's a bit like the meta one that we did where you added a bunch of puppies around you in the photo. That's just like...
This one doesn't seem to be quite that bad, although at least the examples they're showing is more about tidying pictures up and kind of slightly reposing things. But then when you think about the moment where they move and enlarge the focal point of the picture, which is the lady in the example you're showing on screen, I guess everything behind her is then entirely faked because that wasn't there. The camera can't possibly know what that was. So, actually you're then looking at something that isn't entirely real. Having played with this a lot in Photoshop over the years, and again more recently as they've upped their game with Gen AI, it doesn't work as well, generally speaking, as they seem to be making it out here. Having said that, I've never used Magic Editor or Magic Eraser on a Google, so maybe it is as good as it looks here, or as convincing.
I have seen demos, and it is really quite convincing. So I think I've seen both, where you if you compare it to what's the feature in Photoshop? I can't remember what it's called.
It's content aware fill. It used to be, which basically tries to look at the pixels around it and create something. But Gen AI takes this a step further because Gen AI is actually creating objects, whereas content aware fill almost is just kind of blurring colors together to make something that looks convincing, that follows a pattern. It's not really, it wouldn't put something there that wasn't there. It will attempt to blur things together to make it look like something wasn't there.
Yes. I mean, this example here looks quite convincing. I've seen similar before. But the magic eraser bit where you're removing objects in the background, I think the typical example is if you're taking a photo of your family and there's someone who's like photobombing in the background, you can just kind of remove it. Again, it's not really kind of genuine. But if it's just for you and your family, for family photos and stuff, it makes sense. But that was a previous feature that's been around. But this takes it a step further, and I have a bit more creeped out by the super fake background in this particular example. So it's not just removing objects. It's you can select an object, so the woman in this image, and you can move it. You can enlarge it so that it's more it's bigger in the actual screen. But then you can also just completely change the sky in the background, which and
if you look carefully, it didn't just change the background; it relights her.
Relights her as well, and the sand.
Yeah.
And the sand, it makes the sand look nice and
the whole image is effectively retoned, isn't it?
Yeah,
to make it look like it's taken at sunset. When it wasn't.
Yeah.
Which is a bit odd because look where the sun is in the sky. It doesn't make any sense.
It doesn't. Anyway, you're right.
Okay, so we both agree that one's a little creepier, if not super clever. The last thing then, before we get into the Pro itself, because that's where again a few more features start to come to the fore, was the guided frame, which is an accessibility feature effectively, which basically describes what's on screen and looks for what not on screen, what the lens is seeing. So it helps you to frame a better photograph. It recognizes more than faces, and it will help people with those accessibility needs to frame and take better photos. So I'm all for anything that kind of improves accessibility of these devices. I don't know how it would work or how easy it would be to use, but I would assume they've used it with focus groups and tested it, and it's gone down well. So that's a nice thing to add. So then onto the Pro, which has all of the above and some more.
Yeah.
So the first thing that they started to get into hardware here, which is the first time they talked about this stuff. So they said 50 megapixel sensor with better low light, 48 megapixel ultra wide, and a telephoto with 10 times optical quality.
Yes. Quality, which is the key word there, I think.
Yeah. Autofocus on the front camera, which is cool. And then they talked about, which I thought was really interesting, with the Pro controls on the Pro phone. So this is for your photographer or amateur sort of enthusiast, which is adjusting things like directly influencing ISO, your shutter speed, your lens, and your focus, etc. And they also mentioned that with this mode, your pictures will come out in RAW and JPEG so that you can manipulate the original RAW photograph. So useful, nice to have. Again, not unique, I don't think, to the Pixel in terms of RAW and JPEG. That's been around on other phones for a while as well, as I'm sure it has been on the Pixel. But, nice to have. And the Pro controls, again, is something that I think both the iPhone and the Pixel share. Then they had a little sneaky dig at the iPhone.
I knew you'd pick up on this.
With video boost. So this, they showed two camera footages. Weirdly, when they in the spoken audio, they went, we've compared it to this other device we just picked up. But then they called it out on screen. They labeled the footage and went, iPhone 15.
iPhone 15 Pro, nonetheless.
So they showed video boost. They said every frame has been put through image processing for HDR. And I wrote here before they confirmed it, that sounds like it's done off device because they mentioned using data centers.
Yep.
And then they confirmed it. And basically your footage. So first of all, you get a very good quality video. And then your video, within however long, they didn't state how long it takes, is uploaded to the cloud where the HDR Plus is applied to your entire video. Frame by frame, it's then boosted and pushed back to your device, so that you then get an ML edited video, basically.
How wild is that?
Sounds cool. I'm not sure how I feel about it. Only because of I don't know how much computing power is being consumed in the background here to do this. Because they said it's literally frame by frame. Every frame of your video is pulled apart, reviewed. The HDR is modified, and then brought back to you. To do that on every video you take, on every person who has a Pixel Pro, sounds like that's an intensive task that their data centers are going to be absorbing.
Every video, it sounded like it would be like a mode that you could select as part of the phone.
They didn't specify. They said, I mean, maybe it is. Maybe you've got to choose to push that particular thing, or maybe you've got to turn it on. They didn't specifically say that, so the assumption I've made is that it's on every video that goes up. But maybe you're right, maybe you've got to toggle it on or choose it. Either way, though, theoretically you could put every video you take through that, that's a huge amount of processing power to do something that feels slightly unnecessary. And I'm sure will probably come onto device at some point, especially with the amount of power that they're getting into these chips now. So I wasn't completely sure how I felt about that.
To be fair, I think it's really, if you think if it's just the HDR editing that's being applied, it's essentially just, I mean, if you're going to do color grading on some videos, I mean, I don't know how this is done, or HDR editing on videos, I'd assume that's pretty much close to frame by frame. You'd need to do that as well.
Yeah, but you're not sending that up to a data center and then consuming. You're doing it on your device, so it's not.
Yeah,
do you know what I mean? Like, I don't know.
The way I've
visualized
it
is all the Gen AI stuff, and we keep hearing about the environmental impact of using all these data centers and servers to process all of this data. Now, I'm sure, like I said, there's loads of other stuff going on in the world from a data perspective and an environmental perspective that's probably worse than this. It just feels a little unnecessary because they're already taking, by their own admission, really good videos.
Yeah. Why
does it need to do that? Like, why does it need to go to the data center and be manipulated in that way? Could it not be done on device maybe overnight when the phone's not doing anything? Or does it need to be done at all? I don't know. It seems cool. As a pure technology kind of geek, I'm like, great. That's what a cool feature. And I just thought, I don't know. I'd like to know a bit more about it. I'd like to know what the impact of it doing all of that is.
I picture it more of almost outsourcing, like proper color grading, HDR editing of videos. It's not something that you would do on everything, I'd have thought. But I suppose you could have the option. I don't know. It'd be interesting to see the environmental impact. But also, people might also be concerned about the uploading content to the cloud, kind of to edit this. But then I also think, Google Photos, where you'd be backing up most of your photos anyway, or OneDrive.
The data transfer to the cloud is different, though, from the machine learning that's then applied to it, isn't it? To do that, that's the difference. Like most providers push that stuff to the cloud, and that's a part and parcel. Once it's up, but they're then processing it
and then bringing it back.
And if it's like a 10-minute video and it's going frame by frame on a 60-hour video, second video, oh well, yeah, worse. And then it's doing that and then pushing it back down. Like, that's not going to be a simple task. And it's more about the volumes. Like, on a video by video basis, it's probably not that big a deal. But if everyone's doing it, I don't know.
I also wonder whether that would be some kind of premium feature as well, because given that you can have to send it to their cloud, get them to process the videos and then return it. That to me suggests some kind of service that you might need to pay some kind of additional.
They never mentioned that it was a service. They never mentioned that was going to be They mentioned it as if it was a feature. HDR Plus was just a feature. But anyway. Then they mentioned Night Sight, which enabled better low light automatically. And again, that was part of Video Boost. So again, the videos are shot and then they're boosted as part of, I assume, the data centers again. And then we got on to Google Assistant, and they started to talk about some of the Gen AI capabilities in this space. So they mentioned new Gen AI powers using the data centers resources again. They talked about Bard and conversational AI. They talked about 40 languages in 220 territories. And now Bard can do more and can interact with YouTube, Google Maps, and even your docs in Google Docs. So it's basically kind of running across cloud platforms in the Google estate by the sounds of it, and providing its Gen AI capabilities. They gave us an early peek at the Assistant with Bard, which is the new name for it. Not particularly creative. So Google Assistant and Bard have been combined to become Assistant with Bard. And they said it's a step towards delivering the world's most helpful assistant. And again, this was kind of then, as I'm hearing this, I'm reflecting on all the stuff we've just talked about in terms of the call screening and the way this is going. And I'm impressed. So it can hear, speak, see, and take action on device. That's pretty amazing.
We talked about it on the Meta one, where when they can see, hear, and speak, it starts to sound really creepy when you start saying that.
Yeah. And interestingly, they mentioned that in the context of their glasses, which are now going to be AI powered. But I'm going to bet all that's done in the cloud via your phone. This is on device.
Yeah, true.
Or some of it. They said it was coming soon to select testers and expanding as an opt-in experience, which I thought was quite interesting because this could be considered quite invasive depending on how you feel about having Gen AI go across all your documents and your meetings and all your emails and whatever else. So you would have to opt in, which I think is sensible.
I don't know how different that would be to your AI assistant doing the same, though, looking across your calendar or pointing it to some documents and
Yeah, I don't know how that's going to work, but I suppose it's got to do more, isn't it, with that content? It's got to, like with your Google Docs, to be able to analyze them. It's got to read every page. It's got to read every word. I don't know. But it's an opt-in experience. Again, it's probably as well because it's using Gen AI, and it's probably, if it's all on device, I wondered how that works. Whether it's the simple models on device, and then maybe it pushes a bit to the cloud if it needs to. I don't think all of this was on device.
No.
Although it did say the next thing it said was Gen AI baked into the device would proofread messages, summarize web pages, etc. I think the YouTube stuff and the Google Docs stuff has to be done in the cloud.
Yeah.
They said the Pixel 8 Pro will be the first phone ever to run the foundational models directly on device. Distilled down, but still really complex. They said 150 times more computations than the Pixel 7. So that's really cool. This is basically the first Gen AI enabled phone.
Yeah,
that can do some of this, not all of it, on device. As a result, again, they come back to the magic eraser, being able to deal with bigger images and bigger removals, effectively, bigger chunks of pictures. They said Recorder would capture audio and live transcribe it, and then Gen AI could be used to summarize that content and recap highlights. So Recorder's always been able to transcribe by the sounds of it, but Gen AI now gives you that kind of summarization capability, which is pretty sensible. Probably fairly obvious use of that technology.
I know. I feel like a lot of these features have that kind of theme, is that it's nothing new that we've seen with generative AI. It's just bringing it on device and bringing it in your ecosystem. But
it is, I mean, it's very clever though.
Oh yeah, 100%.
You know, to be honest, Siri's going to need some of this if iPhone's going to be able to compete, because there's a lot here that you're going to be able to do that
they need to hurry up.
iPhone users, simply won't be able to do. Pixel 8 Pro will be the first smartphone to have it on device, as we mentioned. It does something which I thought was really funny. Intelligent zoom enhancement. Did you see this? Which is Gen AI powered. This tickled me because it feels like Minority Report or those like sci-fi films where they look at CCTV and they go, enhance, and then it just zooms in and sharpens all these pixels. But that's basically what they're saying this is doing. This is using Gen AI to look at an image that's pixelated and try and sharpen that image.
Well, you know what reminds me? Because they have a feature at the moment called Unblur. I don't know if you caught that earlier as one of the features which is basically the same thing. If you take a photo that's out of focus, you can use Unblur to basically turn it into focus, and it uses some AI to figure out the photo itself. It's essentially the same. If you zoom in and it's a little blurred or a little pixelated, you just use Gen AI to make it unpixelated. It kind of fills in the dots to make it like a more of a fuller frame. So it's kind of an obvious thing to do. I think the
difference, though, I guess, Unblur is not generating new content. It's more of a Unblur's presumably looking at the pixels around it and then sharpening them up. But it's effectively doing this. I mean, you've had these sort of features in Photoshop and Lightroom and things like that for a long time, where you can sharpen an image. But this is, I guess, it's got to Gen AI's, by its name, implies it's generating new content.
Yeah.
So theoretically, it's actually making stuff up that wasn't there, whereas Unblur's going to look to try and make sense of what's around it and reduce the amount of noise. This is actually potentially going to just make shit up. Here's something new that wasn't in your picture. Yeah.
Split the pixels, the pixelators, split them into like 4 or 16 or whatever, and then just create a bunch of pixels in the photo, I guess. Yeah, I suppose that is a bit more.
It just felt very sci-fi to me, which I'm not against. It was quite funny. We're getting towards the end of the presentation then, so they started to talk a little bit about price, but before they did that, they mentioned that the Pixel 8 Pro will continue to be upgraded year on year with more ML tech as it's developed. Then they jumped into price. So Pixel 8, they said, was going to be $699.
Yep.
They don't know if you managed to scrub through or find that video bit that I was talking about with the free watch, but
actually no, I did. I did find an article. Sorry, yeah. I found an article that says that if you pre-order the phone, I think it's either the Pixel 8 or the Pixel 8 Pro, you pre-order it now, you get a free Pixel Watch 2.
There you go. So I was right. I did see it.
Yeah.
There you go. Or even more reason to go and pre-order one of these. So Pixel 8, $699. Pixel 8 Pro, $999. And as I mentioned, as you mentioned and confirmed, free watch if you pre-order, which I just put nice.
That's pretty cool, isn't it?
That's pretty cool. Well, it is when you consider that device is $299.
Yeah.
Or $349, whatever it was.
$349.
So basically, you're if you buy the Pixel 8, you're halving the price of the Pixel 8 near enough.
Yeah.
And getting the watch with it. So, and a clever way on their part to get you into the wearable world if you
weren't
necessarily thinking about it. Yeah, and their ecosystem. And And the other thing that I saw a lot of us on Twitter about before I even watched this was that for the first time, Google's expanding Pixel support to 7 years of OS upgrades, security updates, and feature drops, which means that they'll be supporting the Series 8 until 2030.
Crazy. Because a lot of suppliers, a lot of mobile phone manufacturers will do security updates for an extended period of time. And even then, it's not 7 years. I think that it's mostly 4 at most for security updates. But this isn't just security updates, it's new features and new software updates. So, these issues that we have where we've criticized Apple for before, where it's like the next version of the phone has this software feature that you could quite easily bring to the previous phones. I think this is another dig at that, where it's like the features that we bring to all future phones will be brought to the phone as well, I guess, providing it's possible, which...
I don't know.
7 years.
They did compare themselves to the other big providers, and they said, and the iPhone is the other, which is 6 years.
6+, yeah.
So, but that doesn't necessarily stand true in terms of the features that they bring to their devices year on year.
Mm-hmm.
It means they're going to update them. Doesn't mean you're going to get everything.
Yeah.
So I don't think that means a complete commitment to all features, regardless of what they bring out on new devices.
Yeah.
But like you said, there's no proof that Apple does what everyone says they're doing. It's just it's suggested that maybe they gate off features that could be run on lower devices. We don't know that definitively, but anyway.
7
my
years,
summary,
huge.
It's massive, but no one's going to have their phone for 7 years. And what I did see is, I know the iFixit thing means that you could technically replace these parts, but someone said batteries just don't last that long. Like phones don't last that long. But I guess if you weren't someone who was like a serial updater like we are, then actually you buy one of those and you know it's going to run you 7 years and you're happy to stick a new battery in at some point or get somebody else to do it for you. You could, like I said, you could have that phone for 7 years and theoretically it will still work. I will say though, even at 6 years, which is Apple's commitment, I haven't got a single Apple device in this house that's 6 years old that still works well.
Really?
Not Apple. I mean, they work. Like we've got a couple of iPads that are that old, but they're not particularly slick to use. They're slow. They're painful by modern standards. So I think things just the way that tech is moving and the speed at which it's moving. If you're into tech, you aren't going to tolerate a device that's 7 years old. You're going to want to keep moving.
Yeah, maybe.
But not everyone does that. So for those who don't and are happy to just kind of rumble on with the same phone they've had for how many years, I think it is a good offering. The security thing's the big one. I think the security thing is the biggest part.
Yes. Because
most people who aren't bothered about tech aren't going to be as worried about feature drops.
Yeah.
They probably want to know their phone's secure.
Yeah.
And remains updated.
The other kind of not criticism, I guess, but wariness that I've heard people mention about this is Google has a habit of cancelling things. They've cancelled a number of their products in the past.
Stadia, Google Glass.
When they committed to supporting it. So there's a big question mark about whether you can trust.
It's more about finally Google is supporting something.
Yeah, maybe, but also can you trust that they're actually going to support it for 7 years, or whether that's something that'll get cancelled as well. They've got a track record of not being great for this stuff, so
the device is already 7 years old, so they've done 7 years of Pixel to date, so who knows?
Yeah.
Anyway, that was kind of the end of the presentation. So I guess quick summaries before we call it a day. Mm-hmm. For me, we haven't banged on about it anywhere near as much as they did. They banged on about AI way more than we've talked about it, and we've talked a lot about AI.
We have.
So for me, there was a massive focus on that. That was very clearly their game from the very get-go, which was interesting to me because I was expecting to be more furore around kind of like the device, the hardware, but actually, it was more about software, which not a bad thing. I actually really like the Pixel Pro. I thought it was very interesting, very compelling. I don't need the watch, although a great compliment if you're going to go into that ecosystem, as you said. I have just written here, very compelling, exclamation mark. I'm not going to be buying one because I've just bought the 15 Pro, Max, and I'm really happy with it. But if I was... It's more so than Samsung. I think when we did the Samsung one, I said at the end, the Flip would be the one I'd want to try. Mm-hmm. For the novelty factor, really. Whereas this has actually got some features I'd be really interested to have a mess around with. I'd like to see how the camera performs and compare it, in real life to see whether there's enough of a difference to make me care. I'd like to have a mess with the Gen AI stuff when it starts to land, which will be most of it's next year, to be honest. Call screening would be good, but I probably wouldn't use it as a primary phone if I had it. But yeah, if Google's listening, feel free to send me one. I'll have a play. But I thought it was very interesting. And if I was going to go Android, I'd probably go Google.
Yeah.
Rather than go for one of the other makes for the reasons you mentioned earlier. I always did with Windows as well. I always preferred a sort of clean build.
Yeah.
I would often buy devices from retailers and then just wipe it and rebuild it from scratch to take all of the fluff and stuff out and just have the vanilla OS. So yeah, I would probably go for Pixel if I was going to go down the route of Google. And
they seem to be nailing the AI assistant features as well compared to other devices. So yeah, very compelling. Yeah, I'd agree. I think the phones themselves look really cool. Some of the we kind of glossed over on the actual hardware for the photos. For the camera for the 8 Pro is that, and I don't think any other phone I've seen really has this. All of the camera sensors are very high megapixel counts. So the main one is 50 megapixels. The ultra wide is 48 megapixel, and the telephoto is 48 megapixel, which gives you a lot more detail to play with. From what I've seen of most other manufacturers, it's only the main sensor that is, say, 48, and then the rest tend to be 12 megapixels sensors. So, yeah, I'll be interested to see how that performs, but it just gives you a lot more room to play with. And I have to say, I get quite frustrated when I switch between cameras, and you can really tell the difference in like the quality. So when you go from, say, the main sensor to an ultra wide, and you just don't get anywhere near as much detail. So I actually think that's quite cool, and I really hope that that's a trend that catches on with other manufacturers. But yeah, overall, looks like quite a smart device. I really liked the temperature sensor. I'll be interested to see what use cases are around that. There's a few that were mentioned, but I think if you can take like a person's temperature, that's really quite cool. And they said it would even be added to the Fitbit app, so you can track your temperature over time. And then maybe have some analytics, for example, on whether you're going to get sick or not, which would be quite cool.
Yeah, I was going to say, well, imagine if you're just feeling a bit under the weather. You could you get your phone out and somebody go, I feel quite warm at the moment. What is my temperature? Like, is it just a hot room, or is there something wrong here?
Yeah, exactly.
Which is quite clever. And I assume it can do some sort of ambient temperature. I don't know. And maybe compare. I don't know. Anyway, very clever.
And then I think the AI features on the photos were absolutely crazy. I do like the direction they're going, if not a little bit creepy. I've got in my notes, what is a photo, exclamation mark. And then lastly, just the 7 years of updates. Again, I really hope that catches on as a trend for other manufacturers, because that's just huge for people who need to, who kind of keep their phones for a long time.
Yeah, 100%. Does it have you itching for a return to the dark side, or are you comfortable where you are for now?
I'm comfortable where I am for now. Though I mean, Google have for the longest had the best cameras and the best computational photography, so they are really quite good. But that would be the only reason that would tempt me. I think it's just the cameras. When
you were an Android, but you were Samsung, though, weren't you?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So have you ever been a Pixel?
No. But I've used Pixel, like friends' phones with Pixel cameras, and the thing that you notice about Pixel cameras compared to anything else is that they're so natural. Like everything is color graded perfectly when it comes out. It's like, it looks as true to life as it could possibly be. Whereas you use Samsung and they really whack up the saturation of the colors and to make everything kind of look like a cartoon. And then iPhone just whack up the highlighting. Everything looks well lit when it wasn't. So it can be a bit
That was
weird.
One of the things I didn't like, actually, when they were showing the videos. There were parts of the video that I think was shot in Tokyo. They were showing like a promo video, which I thought just looked way moodier and more interesting before they applied the lighting. And then there were other clips they showed where there was an obvious improvement or it made it better.
Yeah.
But I think sometimes artificially lighting an image that was dark takes away some of the atmosphere.
And the realism.
And also that's it. To your point of the realism. Again, to your point, what is a photo? Well, if that environment wasn't well lit or naturally lit, and it was a bit dark and dingy, that in itself is actually quite hard to capture. Most people will go into an environment that's dark, their flash will be on, especially with the DSLR, those who don't know what they're doing, they'll be flashing away, just blinding everything with light. And that's not how that image was, especially things like parties and things like that, where there is, they're dark and there's lighting and there's a mood for a reason. Sometimes some of those devices can remove some of that. So, I don't know. It'll be interesting to see it in action. Like I said, I liked some of what they were showing, and some of the bits looked a bit unnatural or removed the effect or the mood that I thought was created by the places she was shooting in. But
yeah,
well, we'll leave it there. Really interesting to kind of unpack that with you, Robbie, as always. Thank you for joining us for this episode. We hope you enjoyed it. If you did, then please do like and subscribe wherever you might be watching, whether that's on YouTube or one of